even as reporters and people in the media, we don't get access to those conversations, right? Like,
you're tuned in to the Ross Tucker Football Podcast, guiding your gridiron journey, none other than your host, former NFL lineman, Ross Tucker.
Oh, yeah, it is. But it's not just any Ross Tucker Football Podcast. It is a Monster Monday, always presented by DraftKings. Just use the code Ross. Whether you're playing best ball on the regular app or you're placing some wagers on the Sportsbook app, it's a new week, which means we'll have a new college draft with Emory Hunt today, talking about the best prospects in the SEC, and there's a lot. I mean, just the quarterbacks, Jalen Milroe and Quinn Ewers, to name a couple, Carson Beck. So you got to listen or watch youtube.com/Ross Tucker NFL, the college draft today. Gonna have a special show with Steve Fezzik tomorrow with some tips for you, as well as what he's betting on the Hall of Fame game on the Even Money podcast. Wednesday Fantasy Feast. And of course, we got some guests lined up for Wednesday and the great Greg Cosell on Thursday. Please check us out on social media at Ross Tucker NFL or at Ross Tucker Pod. There's a lot of news since last Thursday that we have to get to. But first, I love when we get people that I like and admire on as guests for the first time in the show's history, which is rare because we've been around so long. It's Judy Battista. It's Big Show time.
The Big Show.
Always great to talk with any of the NFL insiders, especially now that they've got their own TV show in prime time every night called The Insiders. And today's guest looks just like she does on TV. I was just watched this on TV the other night. The great Judy Battista. She's been covering the NFL for a long time. I don't want to date you, Judy. You can follow her on social media at Judy Battista. I think she's been covering it since I was a player. Maybe how long has it been now?
Yeah, 2000 was my first season. So it's been a long time. Long time.
My rookie year was 2001.
There Judy. You go. Yes. So I predate you, which is just awful.
So have you been in New York the whole time?
Yes. I started my career at the Miami Herald, but I covered the NFL the whole time in New York. So I started on the Jets beat. So that was literally my first day on the beat was the day Bill Belichick resigned as HC of the NYJ. So
oh my gosh, you got to tell me that story.
It was I was shadowing the person who I was taking over for, Jerry Eskenazi, great Jerry Eskenazi from the New York Times. He was retiring, and so I was just sort of shadowing him that day, just so we were thinking well, it's a new regime starting, so he'll introduce me to people, and this will be a really nice, smooth transition. And then, kaboom! What just happened? And I really thought to myself, what am I getting myself into with this beat? But incredibly, it did not calm down considerably even after that. You would think it would be easier after that, but not the Jets. So,
you know what? It's funny that you say that, because that's one of the questions I actually want to get into with you while we talk. It's funny though, Judy. I my rookie year, okay, we lost to the Chargers in the first game. Then we came back and, you know what? Lost the Chargers in the first game. Then the cable guy is at my apartment because I'm a rookie who made the team. So I stay in the same apartment complex every other guy does. And the cable guy comes on Tuesday, the off day, to hook up my computer. To hook up our cable and TV and stuff. Judy, when he comes in the house, he's like, evidently one of the Twin Towers just got hit by a plane.
Oh.
So he connects my cable. The cable guy and I sat on my couch the next 3 hours, just he and I watching what was going on. Speaking of first days, that was my wife's at the girlfriend at the time, first day of work, and she worked downtown. So it was just, and what's really crazy about it, then the Pentagon thing happened. So my mom's calling me because all she knows is I'm in Northern Virginia, and she wants to know what's going on. The weird thing is, it was our off day, and it was early September, in
Yeah.
the second, in the afternoon, I went to the pool and kept trying to call my girlfriend, kept trying to call my buddies from college, and just kept saying all circuits are busy. And
Yes.
I only seen my girlfriend maybe 3 or 4 times. We had just started dating, so I didn't really have like her home number or her parents' number to ask them if she was okay. It was just, I mean, that was it. And then, by the way, we don't play that weekend, so I
Right.
get to see her. And then we do play the following Monday night against Green Bay, very emotional game. Next day, I come into the facility and I find out Jeff George got cut. They cut the starting
Oh,
quarterback after the second game. I mean, I was like, speaking of what you said about the Jets, I was
right.
like, wow, okay,
What
so this
just,
is what the
wow.
NFL's like.
Right. Life in the NFL.
It's crazy, absolutely crazy. What was it like for you for 9/11, covering the New York teams being there?
The teams were really emotional. Herm Edwards was in his first year as a head coach, if you can imagine, right? And of course, the season had just started. So, I mean, very early in his head coaching tenure, he handled it really well. Tuesday, as you know, is an off day. So we were not at the facility. And I remember talking to people at the league office that afternoon saying, like, I mean, are our teams going to practice on Wednesday? Like, what are we doing here? Like, what's going on? And of course, living in New York, like we didn't even know if we were going to be able to get around because at that point there was talk about, closing the bridges and tunnels. And so they said, yeah, we're proceeding as normal for now while a decision is made. And so the Jets practiced on Wednesday. And I remember the folks at the Jets, like, their travel people, like were reserving hotel rooms even for the beat writers because at that time they trained at Hofstra University, which is in Hempstead on Long Island, and we didn't know if once we went out there if we were going to be able to get back home. People who lived in New York and New Jersey, we weren't sure, so they were holding hotel rooms for us on Long Island in case we were stranded out there. Herm handled it really, really well. It was very emotional. There were a lot of players on that team who are from the area. Vinny Testaverde, Wayne Corbett, so those guys knew people who were missing, and it was obviously just devastating. I thought the teams in New York handled it really well. The Giants train, right over the river, Hudson River, so they could see everything from the stadium, and they could see the smoke, for weeks. It was immensely difficult and emotional. And I thought the NFL handled it really well. I mean, canceling the games, I think, was the right thing to do. It took Paul Tagliabue took a few days to think about it, but he sort of thought about, Pete Rozelle did not cancel the games after President Kennedy was assassinated. And that was a big thing. And, in retrospect, there was a lot of conversation about that was probably not the right decision at the time. And, Tagliabue thought about that, and I think did the right thing in stopping the games that weekend and letting everybody take a deep breath and start over the following week. And I thought the New York teams handled it about as well as you could under just impossible circumstances.
Well said. Totally agree. And yes, at the time, I don't know that. I don't remember how I felt about the decision to postpone. Yeah, I was a rookie. I didn't really think about anything. I just was going with the flow, as you might imagine. You mentioned the Jets, and you said it didn't really calm down with the Jets even after that first day. I've been thinking about this, Judy, and I want your opinion on it. I want to be clear. I don't think that this is the case. Okay. I don't think that the Jets do some of this stuff on purpose.
No.
But I guess I look at them, Judy, and it feels like they miss so many layups, and there's so many unforced errors, to use yet another sport analogy, that there are times where I wonder if Woody Johnson went to the Jerry Jones school of any publicity is good publicity, right? Because like the Aaron Rodgers thing, and I know you were talking about on TV recently, they could have moved the minicamp up a week like other teams had it the week earlier. They could have easily done that. Or the bigger thing to me, Judy, it would have been so easy for them to just give their 41-year-old starting quarterback an excused absence for something that's important to him. There were excused absences for mini camps all over the league, and yet the Jets wouldn't do it. And so sometimes I wonder if they feel like being in the news is good for business.
I think that I agree with you that they could have moved the mini camp up, right? I mean, that's an easy thing. Call that what ended up being like an OTA, call that the mini camp, and then just get rid of a few days. I think they probably just wanted to make the point there that like they had other players. There were other players who missed and and had to be fined, and so they could not give him an excused absence for something that they give excused absences. You're right, all the time when there are emergencies with a family or a child is being born or something like that. People get excused all the time. This was not that, obviously. The thing with Aaron Rodgers is sometimes he does things that you go like, why is he doing that? But then 99% of the time he is Aaron Rodgers on the field, which is exactly why they want him and why they are willing to absorb the other stuff, because he is still at 40, an incredibly dynamic player who lifts the entire organization. I mean, we saw that last year before the injury. The entire organization was energized by his presence and had this feeling of hope and possibility that just did not exist there before. And that's hard to capture for a team that, when you haven't been to the playoffs for a dozen years, like it's hard to galvanize everybody in the building, not just the players and the coaches, but like the ticket sales people and, the catering crew, like all of those people were so excited. And that's hard to do like this. And he did it just by showing up and being there. His teammates love him. He was great. He was always around the facility until he got hurt, obviously. He was involved. And until this mini camp a few weeks ago, he was involved in all of the off-season activities. So yeah, I think it was, he said when he met with the media, like he knew the consequences. He's an adult, he knew. And so you're sort of like, well, then why'd you do it? But this is the whole Aaron Rodgers experience, right? And the payoff for all of that is that, he's a first ballot Hall of Famer on your team.
Let's move to the team, the other team in the city, because they've also been in the news as of late, and it's been fascinating. This off-season Hard Knocks, I felt like, yeah, Judy, I felt like Hard Knocks was starting to lose some steam a little bit, the training camp Hard Knocks, and we kind of knew the routine, and if there's nothing interesting, it's like, okay. This change up of having an off-season Hard Knocks and these conversations between the owner, John Mara, and the GM, Joe Shane, and then the phone conversations between Shane and players or agents, it's really been fantastic. I guess my question is, do we think any other team will want to do it after this?
Good question. I think it's been so good because even as reporters and people in the media, we don't get access to those conversations, right? Like we see the training camp practices, and even fans can go to training camp practices, but there's a lot of coverage of training camp practices, even the in-season stuff. Obviously, we see a lot of stuff in the in-season, right? You see the games, you can watch the practices, but this kind of stuff, the conversations in the office, the phone calls with Saquon Barkley, the conversations with the owner, like we're just not privy to that. Even the reporters who are covering it on a daily basis are not sitting in their office listening to their conversations. So it's been fascinating, just even the body language. I mean, there was one day, I don't know if you noticed this, but like whenever John Mara walks into Joe Shane's office, like he knocks on the door, and I'm like, owners are not, like, you own the building, do you have to knock on the door? But will any team do it again? I hope so. They've given them a lot of access. Like I've been surprised by how much candor there has been. And they obviously have edit rights, and the league has edit rights. They can look at it and say, get that out. The amount of stuff that's been in makes me wonder what did they tell them to take out? Because they've left a lot in. Those conversations with Saquon were candid. And even the conversations between the owner and coach and GM and staff, like those are pretty candid conversations. And it does make me wonder what they might have edited.
What I think's interesting about it too is Shane goes on speakerphone on some of those calls, and it came out, the first day of Eagles training camp that Saquon Barkley did not know that those calls were being recorded. I think that's a little bit of a slippery slope. I'm assuming that he have to sign some type of, release or something. I don't know how
I
that
don't know.
works, but I think at a minimum, seems like Joe Shane could have, and maybe they did in a separate, well, I would say they did in a separate conversation, but Saquon said he didn't know. Saquon said he
Right.
didn't know he was being recorded. I think that's an interesting tact for the league to allow.
I would agree with you. I was surprised to hear him say he didn't know that it was being recorded. I go back to what you said, like, will any team allow this to happen? Again, will any team allow those cameras in there? NFL Films is really good at these things, at being unobtrusive. Devontae Adams, who was part of the Receiver show that aired on Netflix, said, like, he's a pretty private guy, but like those guys were so good, like it wasn't really an infringement, didn't feel like an infringement. NFL Films is really good at sort of sinking into the background, like, and just, being unobtrusive, but getting that kind of access. And so I do think teams would benefit by allowing it, because I do think it humanizes everybody and it shows you the agonizing decisions. I mean, you've seen John Mara agonizing over Saquon Barkley, right? Like, when he said, like, I'm going to have trouble sleeping if he goes to the Eagles, you're all like, oh gosh. So I think it humanizes everybody and it shows you how they struggle with these decisions and how they have to make difficult decisions, and then how excited they get when they get something that goes their way. So I think teams would benefit from it, but I agree with you. In a league that is, I mean, they're all paranoid, they're all nervous. They don't, it's like they're guarding the nuclear codes. I wonder what team they're going to convince to do this.
Yeah, I mean, I think Mara has come across pretty good in it, because ultimately he lets Shane do what Shane wants to do. But yeah, it's especially fun now because we know the results, right? Like, we know he did go to the Eagles. We know they did draft Neighbors. The quarterback, moving up for a quarterback, is interesting as it relates to Daniel Jones, for sure. You also, Judy, always do a fantastic job with sort of league issues and health and safety stuff. I'm curious on the Guardian caps. I'm seeing now the skill guys are wearing them, and also they now have it so that it looks like the team helmet, right? Like, it's not just
They've
like
got
this
skull caps on. Yeah, like
right. They
the
got
team
the skull
logos
caps
are
on over it. Do you think we'll see players, many wearing them in games, and thoughts on that?
Well, they are allowed to wear them in games if they want to. That's new. I don't know if we're going to see players wearing them in games, for a few reasons. First of all, when Guardian caps were first introduced, there were some complaints about, like, they made the players hotter, right? Like they were trapping the heat in the helmet. And so that was obviously uncomfortable. I know they've tried to address that with the manufacturers. But the other thing is, the NFL does this sort of annual helmet testing, and there's all these new helmets that come on the market every year, and they test them for safety. They have helmets now that they tested this year that outperformed a helmet with a Guardian cap. They were safer. So to me, if I were a player, I would say, if I was going to change my equipment, I would say, well, just give me the helmet. That's the best, rather than, wearing a helmet with then the Guardian cap and then the skull cap over it. But this, Ross, and I've learned it during this helmet thing, like, players are reluctant to change their equipment once they are settled in it and comfortable with it. And that's understandable. And I think the league is probably going to have to do a whole lot of education about what's available, and not just with players. That's, the equipment managers of each team. I mean, they're the conduit, to the player, and trying to talk to the player about what might be best for them. And I think there's just going to have to be more education. For example, last year they came out with a quarterback specific helmet that was designed with extra padding in the back because that's how quarterbacks fall, to sort of prevent concussions. And a handful of quarterbacks for it in the league, not all starters, just a handful of all the quarterbacks in the league. And I just think it's a slow process of familiarizing guys with what's available and getting them comfortable. Quarterbacks I know are especially are concerned with the sight lines and the peripheral vision, and I get all of it. And so I just think it's a very slow process to get guys to change equipment. So I don't know if we'll see them wear Guardian caps. I would not be surprised, though, if the league says, well, listen, if you're thinking about wearing a Guardian cap in the game, why don't you just wear one of these fantastic new helmets that are even better?
Check her out on the Insiders on NFL Network, 7 p.m. Eastern Time, Monday through Friday, as well as on social media at Judy Battista. Does an outstanding job covering the NFL. Since the year before I got there, she's been covering the NFL. She's got me by a year. Judy, great stuff. Thank you so much.
Great to talk to you, Ross. Take care.
Awesome stuff with Judy. Wow, it's fat. I mean, I can't believe that was her first day. And then shortly thereafter, September 11th. And then obviously she's all over the Jets and Giants. It feels like, well, I guess especially the Jets, there's just always stuff going on with that team for whatever reason. You know what's going on with me? Labatt Blue Light, because it's delicious. Take it to the next level with friends. Always drink responsibly. Labatt USA, Buffalo, New York, as you take it to the power of we.
Tuck's Takes.
All right, Ross. Biggest news from the weekend. Tua Tagovailoa and Jordan Love, they both score huge second contracts from the Miami Dolphins and the Green Bay Packers, respectively, early morning.
Both on Friday. They went back-to-back on Friday. And I have a couple of things I think are interesting about this. 3 things, maybe. So I guess I'll make this my Labatt Take of the Week. Presented by Labatt Blue Light, the pristine Canadian Pilsner. Enjoy your beers together so you can live life to the power of we. Always enjoy responsibly. Beer, Labatt USA, Buffalo, New York. 3 thoughts on the Tua and Jordan Love contracts. Number 1, thrilled for both of them, but especially Tua. The college injury, the concussions, didn't know if this would happen for him. Awesome. On the Jordan Love part, he's only been a starter for 1 year. Had a bad stretch of games last year. I think the Packers are doing the right thing here, but it is interesting that he really benefited, I would say, on some level from not playing until this point. The last thing I would say about these guys, I think Jordan Love would get a decent amount more on the open market than Tua Tagovailoa would. They get similar contracts with their current clubs, but if they were free agents, I think with Tua, the injury history and the concern that he's a special type of player and needs to be in Mike McDaniel's offense, whereas I think the thought is Jordan Love could really make plays and excel in any offense. I just think if they were free agents, there'd be a lot more interest in Jordan Love than Tua.
We've got some contract news. The Broncos, they adjust the contract of wide receiver Courtland Sutton, giving him a slight pay raise with incentives. And the Patriots, they signed safety Jabril Peppers to a 3-year, $24 million extension.
Right. Sutton didn't get a huge increase, but he got a little something. And then for Jabril Peppers, the Patriots are taking care of their own. They're sending a message that even though we were bad, we've got a lot of players we think are good.
And we've got some injuries as NFL teams are starting camp. The Rams, they lose starting cornerback Darian Kendrick to a torn ACL, while Lions kicker Michael Badgley, he's out for the season with a torn hamstring. Some smaller injuries, Browns cornerback Greg Newsome has a hamstring surgery, while defensive tackle Dalvin Tomlinson, he will undergo a knee scope, with both teams hopeful to be back for week 1.
Right. So, but those are things to keep an eye on because they might not be back by week 1. And even if they are back by week 1, they may not be playing at as high of a level as the Browns need them to. Obviously, the Rams losing a starting corner is not good. It's happened a couple times now where teams have lost corners. The Vikings lost Mekhi Blackman. The Lions already had another kicker on the roster, so that's a positive for them. The only other note, Jack, I saw that's interesting, Jamar Chase and Trey Hendrickson still not practicing for the Bengals. seems like we may have a hold-in situation there. I don't know if that's been expressly said or not, but I'm intrigued to learn more. I'm also sad because that's it. I think we're done here.
Thanks for tuning in to the Ross Tucker Football Podcast. Make sure to also check out Even Money, Fantasy Feast, and College Draft, all on the DraftKings Network on Samsung TV Plus, YouTube, or subscribe to the podcast on your favorite platform.
Shout out myfrontpagestory.com. Just got one from one of you guys, so I'm sending him an autograph. I look up his name. I'll say it on Wednesday's show. But I love it. He sent me in, hey, I got this for my mom or whoever. I can't remember who he got it for. And I'm sending him an autograph in the mail. That's how it works. myfrontpagestory.com. Also love Pizza Boy Brewing, Sporticulture, HumanHeadNYC.com.